sometimes when property managers and landlords get together, the topic of like their worst or most costly eviction or turnover or that kind of thing will come up. And I wanted to share my most costly eviction, the one I should have been fired for early in my career. So I started my career in multifamily property management, and I managed several 100-unit communities. Like if you maybe get an apartment guide where you live, they have fitness centers and pools and things like that. And this particular one had, I think 300 doors at the time. And so I was the leasing agent, and I rented to a couple, a man and a woman and their daughter. And it was a very typical, nothing unusual sort of lease. And pretty quickly into the tenancy, the rent became delinquent. And what was more unusual about this tenant versus maybe other delinquent tenants I had encountered, and by this time I was the property manager, by the way, so now I was really accountable for what happened at this property. And I was early in my career. I was in my young 20s. This tenant, the man, would come into my office almost every day to let me know he was going to be late, to let me know the reasons, and to give me like long, detailed explanations. And it was really effective because it kind of kept me off of him, I felt informed, up to date, like he was doing everything he needed to do to get this rent paid. And very quickly, the rent was not being paid at all. And I mean, month after month after month. And I had bosses, right? I had a regional property manager, and she was a great mentor, by the way. She's left the business, but I loved working with her. And thank God she didn't fire me when this happened. But I used to have to send reports up and say, here you go, bosses at the regional level. Here's the tenants that haven't paid. Here's what I've done about it. Here's the status of everything. I do not know how this tenant month after month after month would go, because we would file in the first month of delinquent rent. So this tenant would come in and tell me about how their identity had been stolen, and they were going through that. And then something happened with the lawyers that were helping them with the identity theft. And then they told me that they got these 2 jobs when they came to town, and one of them wasn't paying him at all. He had worked for months without a paycheck. And I think in this case, it was like maybe like an emergency transport company, like ambulances or something. It wasn't like an under the table kind of gig. So anyway, it went on and on and on and on and on until finally I did get a wake up call. And I cannot remember what the wake up call was, but the rent had not been paid for over 6 months. With fees, this tenant owed now just over $8,000. Now here's a fun little fact. At our local district magistrate, where we handle landlord tenant cases, you can't go for an amount over $8,000. So anyway, I ended up filing at the district magistrate. We filed for less than we were owed so we could do it in that court. And I was successful in obtaining the eviction. However, it got worse. So the timing of the eviction, where we actually took possession, that date actually ended up being December 23rd. I've never had an eviction closer to the Christmas holiday before, but this one was on December 23rd. Schools were open that day. The eviction was at 9 a.m. And in that case, the constable comes if there's anybody in the property. And in this case, the couple, the man and the woman, were like having breakfast at the table as if it was a normal day, although this was very well planned in advance, notices given, all of this. And so they packed a bag with medications and things they needed for a night or two, and then left. And unfortunately, what happened around 3 p.m. that day was the school bus let out. And I saw the young girl who lived in that apartment walking up the hill to her apartment. And I was so fearful she would get to the top of that hill and find the door locked and not know what to do and be scared. And so I was getting ready to get into my car to go retrieve her and bring her to the office so that we could call her parents. And just before I reached my car, I saw her parents drive up and get her. And this is a terrible story. It's heartbreaking. But in this case, that tenant was a con artist. They were working actively to deceive us to get what they wanted, which was, not to have to pay for their rent. And so, a story I take a lot of lessons from, and I try to share that story with people I work with to let you know we're all human, we're all fallible. Sometimes we make mistakes, but if we understand that and can account for it in our processes, we can overcome it. But that is probably my worst one.